You're back in session. Welcome to the afternoon joint session between the Emergency Services Advisory Council and the Board of Carroll County Commissioners. To start off with, Chief, I think we'll just do some brief introductions, as we always do. Maybe we should wait till Commissioner Krebs gets here, and then we'll do the introductions.
Sure.
Our newest commissioner. So, Chief, I'll just turn it right over to you.
All right, and Commissioner, I'm not a chief. I've never been a chief. I just want to make sure that that's cleared up.
Don't even play one on television.
I don't even play one on television. So, but thank you for the accolade, the title. My name is Rick Baker. I'm the chair of the Emergency Services Advisory Council, and I'm also the Southern rep for the county, representing stations 1, 12, 13, and 14. Mike?
Michael Karolenko, lieutenant with the Carroll County Department of Fire and EMS, and one of the career representatives to the ESAC.
Chief Michael Robinson, the director of the Department of Fire and EMS.
And he is a chief.
They tell me.
Tim Legor, chairman of the Fire and Rescue Operations Committee.
Blaine Wright, citizen representative for the committee.
On this way too. Roberta Wyndham, county administrator.
Yeah, Mike Guerin, Carroll County Commissioner, District 4, and ex officio member of ESAC.
Gio Vigliotti, Carroll County Commissioner, District 1.
Tom Gordon, County Commissioner for District 3.
Kenny Kyler, District 2, and I've got a brief comment, and I was probably going to get with you, but now I got the whole crowd here. Yesterday in Annapolis, I heard from more than 2 people that Carroll County didn't have volunteers. So this bill didn't apply to us, and I said, no, that's wrong. Well, and they blamed you. They said, well, you guys hired him and he made it all paid. And I said, no, EMS is paid, fire is volunteer, and it's so hard to get that even through some Carroll County heads. So I just wanted to mention that, so anything you guys can do, great.
Well, I think, and we'll get to that, Commissioner, but I think it's something we need to do, totally, everybody sitting in this room, is because there's still a lot of confusion out there with that. We still have volunteers providing EMS service. It's not all career people, but a majority of it is being handled by the career people. As we go through the brief, we'll talk a little bit more about that, as that there's going to be, with our call volumes going up, and that there is more first responder calls, which are being handled by both career and volunteer folks, as are a lot of the other incidents that we're all responding to. So we'll touch on that. Okay to go ahead and get started?
All right. And if I could real quick, I'd just like to introduce several members of my staff that are present here. Our Deputy Chief Operations, Chief Paul Supko, Amy Rigler-Bloom, who heads up our EMS revenue operation, our billing, and our administrative analyst, person running DFEMS, Callie Williams. Thank you.
All right.
Rick, was there anybody else in the audience you wanted to introduce?
Well, Susan Mott's Vice President of Visas here. We have Mr. Schaefer from Reese is here. We have Bruce Fleming, who's the first Vice President of Visa, and Richard Coons, who is the liaison to Visa.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
All yours.
All right, thanks. So some of the topics we want to discuss today, just some of the accomplishments, some career staffing, the 27 budget, apparatus replacement, volunteer funding, and recruitment and retention. When I use the term department today, I am referring to the entire department that is made up of the career and volunteer members. When I say department, I mean the Department of Fire and EMS, which is everybody. I will venture, when I break off into some things, that we'll talk about the things that need to be addressed with the career department, as well as some of the things that the volunteers that we feel need to be addressed as well, too. So for DFEM's accomplishments, I think one of the biggest ones on here is that the the department responded to 25,517 incidents this year. That's not on the slide, but if you have a slide there where it talks about projections that we made back in November, working with our data analyst when we thought we were meeting in December, some of the dates, and we weren't far off. from those numbers. We continue to work towards of creating this model volunteer career combination fire department in the county. We do have 13 stations that are now have staffing that was planned for each one of them. That staffing is for fire and EMS positions. Policies continue to be written and we'll talk on some of those a little bit more, but all those policies were related to tactics, reducing injuries, risk and liability, and loss of life. There was a lot of information that was shared and written and reviewed by, written part mainly done by DFEM's personnel, the career personnel, reviewed by everybody in the department if they chose to review them. That was done by the career and volunteer officers, and then fed back into ESAC for us to be able to discuss it. We had adjustments and enhancements to leadership positions by making the EMS cars lieutenants. They now have some supervisory capabilities, and that helped with the span of control with having the officers to employees ratio a lot better than it was before when we were just relying on the 3 stations that had lieutenants at stations 1, 12, and 13. And I should say Mount Airy, Sykesville, and Westminster, 1, 3, and 12, I'm sorry. It is new skills that the EMS department we've been rolling out with the use of ventilators, with the use of IV pumps, with the whole blood program that I know Chief has informed you guys of that more than once or twice. There's been some awesome success stories that the department can claim that's been happening with some of these new changes. And she's not here, but I'm going to sing her props a little bit. I got to give Dr. Kemp a lot of credit. I mean, she's been awesome. Not only as far as participating in our ESAC meetings, but the last meeting she gave some examples that I think Blaine and you and some of the other citizen reps were really took advantage of and was good for them. I don't know if you want to add anything
I
to
would
that.
like to add to that. Talking about getting word out to the community, I wish we could have those meetings videoed sometimes, and so you could get the messages out. Some of the saves and success stories that Dr. Kemp, and it's a team effort, but I believe she's spearheading things through the educational aspect and what the staff and the staffing in Carroll County, we just weren't capable of doing a couple of years ago. And to hear the stories firsthand, some of the officers or some of the folks that have really put themselves on the line by doing procedures and trachs and things that they wouldn't have even had the training to do a couple of years ago, that literally has saved lives where people are alive today. So I think you touched on it, that we do need to do a better job of the success stories that's taken place with this thing. So I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. We had our first recognition and awards programs for the entire department that recognize career and volunteer folks as well as citizens. And there's another one planned for April, correct? April 7th. Right. And one of the first things that I briefed this board is when you all came in, I think it was when your first year here, is when we discussed in this forum that the need to update the adequate facilities document so that DFEMS was recognized in there, as well as changes to response profiles and things that needed to be updated with the additions of some of the things that brought with when DFEMS was created. So those were just a portion of some of the things that we've talked about, but I think one of the big things is keep in mind that number of incidents that we responded to in this county last year. It's not going to go down, it's going to continue to go up. Some of Visa's accomplishments, the Emergency Services Training Program. We've had 10 students that have passed the EMT certification requirements. 15 students have recently started Firefighter 1 class. And they also have gone to the fall career nights at the Ag Center explaining about those programs. Those numbers are as of last week when I talked to the association's training center liaison, and she gave me those informations. It also provides an opportunity for the folks that are in Firefighter 1 right now for people who might not be in the EST program, who aren't in the EST program, but gives them an opportunity, if they're available during the daytime, to take classes. And I know that there's a couple folks that are doing that now, too. They had a successful junior day in September. 79 juniors participated in that, and that's a picture of them down there on the right-hand side. And there's another one planned on April 11th. They continue to push the information out to middle school and high schools of both programs, and it's not only the officers at Visa, but also the individual departments are also using whatever public time that they have with people to get those programs out there too. Both programs benefit the fire and EMS system of the county. Hopefully that these students will continue to get educated, eventually have opportunities to work in this county, continue to volunteer in this county. ESAC, as well as the association, as well as Chief Robinson sees this as a benefit of having these folks here that will eventually, hopefully, either become employees or continue to be huge players on the volunteer side, or maybe even both. And if you guys have any questions while I'm going through this, please ask. One of the slides that I did add that I didn't think about it, so that probably since I represent ESAC, we ought to talk a little bit about what we've done over the past year. And some of the policies that I mentioned earlier about, it was over 30 policies, both administrative and operationally. Some of the administrative policies were a driver training policy as well as a accident review board that is intended for all personnel of the department. Improvements to operational tactics, where from the point of chain of command and who is in charge and of an incident to folks being able to talk on the radio using the same terminology all the time, to providing reports to be given once they arrive on the scene so people know what's going on when they get there. And all of that will lead to firefighter safety on the scene of an incident. We have taken the liberty in ESAC that if there is a policy that is safety related, that we will go ahead and approve that in draft while we wait comments, and we're reviewing one right now, that there were some good comments made to it, that when we meet again in the middle of this next week, we'll make some of those changes and see if we get approval for those as well too. Yes.
Just real quick on those policies, I don't want to understate the significance and the collaboration that went into that. I think a large amount of kudos goes to central coordination of Deputy Chief Supko on making this move forward. And then the volunteers working in a really collaborative way, provide feedback and allow that to come to fruition. But what this did was created kind of a shining example of best practice for how we're going to start approaching these, packaging these policies, educating the floor, so the people that are actually responding on the calls, and then also reaching out to our mutual aid jurisdictions around us, all the counties that run these calls with us, to make sure that they know what to expect when they're coming in here, that this consistency now, and expectations now exist here in Carroll, but then, how they get to operate with us on a regular basis. I'd also just like to say, I think it's a lot of the vision of the Deputy Chief on how that was packaged too. I think it puts a very professional and, deserving face on what we're doing here, that these things are going out in such a professional, well-packaged and delivered manner to everybody around us. So it's been an awesome step forward that we really had a hard time accomplishing before.
New apparatus request. Chief came to the board a few months ago and requested to buy 3 new ambulances that will be delivered in late calendar year 27, early calendar year 28. And those processes, way the policy is written right now, that it's just not volunteer equipment, but it's also county-owned equipment comes to ESAC, so for awareness and visibility. But on the volunteer side, there were letters written for 4 engines, a heavy-duty rescue squad, 4 utility vehicles, 2 duty vehicles, and an ATV. That's $7.5 million worth of commitment from the volunteer corporations to the county government and to the Department of Fire and EMS. Since we've started this process, and when I say we, the ESAC process of reviewing apparatus or making recommendations to the chief on purchases, that number is over $22 million worth of equipment.
Is that a separate committee or is that you guys?
That's us.
So you guys do that evaluation too?
The process is that the volunteer corporation writes a letter to the chief sends it to me, we distribute it out to the members of ESAC. When I get them, I send it out to the members of who I represent. I get feedback from them, we go to the meeting, we discuss it, and then we say yay or nay, whether or not we make we're just making recommendations.
Yep,
Whatever
yep.
we can say, he can veto, he's got veto power. So it's, but it's, and we'll talk a little bit more about this and how this plays a key role in how we're building this whole department over here for the next few years. But over $22 million since we've started, that's a pretty significant contribution. And while we're having these conversations, it always rolls back into what the future looks like. We're talking about these policies and, okay, so we're doing this now, but we need to get to this point in order, this is our next step. We have this piece of apparatus that we're approving. Well, what's the next piece going to look like? Or where's this next one going to go? Or what do we need it to do? Do we need this many pieces of equipment? All those conversations that are happening, and it usually always goes back to the future, which is kind of a cool thing when we do that.
Back to the Future would be a great title for a movie.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that, Roberta. And that drawing that you see that's up here, that's of Sykesville's new engine that's going to be built by E1, what it looks like at $1.3 million. So I asked the career folks, the DFMs, to make this chart up for me because I thought it was pretty significant because I wanted the board to look at and understand that the chart on the left, and you have this on a bigger slide on yours, in your package there too, so it's a little bit easier to read. Of the number of folks or personnel that are cross-trained, that are fire and EMS trained, all of the people on those two charts will respond to EMS calls. EMS calls are 80% of the calls that we run in the county. The last bottom part of there is the 31 people who are EMS only. I don't want to disqualify them as being less qualified to do the things that they do, but if any of those personnel were to show up on the scene of a building fire, which we seem to have been having a lot of building fires here in the county for the past, in this winter fire season so far, will all contribute to the mission while they're on that ground. If somebody is a paramedic only, they will be on their medic unit and they will be waiting for a patient or somebody to come out to them to be treated. They will sit there and set up rehab so that when people cycle out of the building, they go to rehab to have their vital signs monitored to make sure that there's nothing going wrong with them and to see if they can return back to work at the end of their rehab time. So everybody on this chart has a contribution to make on a fire incident or a rescue incident of any length of time. It is a fire and EMS department. And that's, and like I said, and this is just a career side of the house. We haven't gotten to the point yet of making one up for what the volunteer side of the house looks like yet. Okay? So now let's talk about some budget stuff. So the first thing that we have on the list is 8 floater positions. The thing that I want to keep folks aware of that we, ESAC, and the previous board had a number of 232 total personnel. We are currently at 224 total personnel. When we came up with the number 232, that was including these 8 floater positions for a total of 24 floater positions to cover the mandatory, to cover the people who are going to be out on FMLA, who were on sick, who were light duty, who were unable to perform the operations that needed to be performed by the department. For this past calendar year of 2025, there have been 26 times when people were held for over 24-hour period, that they were planning on getting off work that morning, but were unable to get off work that morning because they were held over. Now, 91 times that somebody was held over for 12 to 23 and 40 times for under 12. So for a total of 2,080 hours that there were folks that were held over that weren't planned, that didn't plan on working that day, but they knew they were on the holdover schedule, but they didn't know if they were going to be held over or not. Chief, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, or,
No, and understand the holdovers, we have a system in place where certain shifts they are actually scheduled who anticipates to be held over, but a lot of the challenge that we have, we've got a lot of younger people starting families, so now it's Christmas morning, their child's first Christmas, and they're not going home. And when we look at retention, and we're always going to have retention issues, like any organization, but one of the things that will cause people to not want to work here the quickest is being held over. And this happens with probably the greatest frequency among our paramedics and paramedic firefighters. And so there are times where we max out on our ability to hold over, where we actually have a systematic mechanism to downgrade certain units. So right now, every day we have 16 paramedic ambulances. When we've maxed out on our holdovers, there are days, and we have a whole a pecking order, if you will, to do that, where we'll take one of the 2 Mount Airy units down to just an EMT ambulance. Union Bridge goes down to an EMT ambulance, and we have a whole system to do that. And we do not like that to happen because obviously it leaves areas of the county with less than the optimal coverage. When that does happen, what we will do is stratify a response, and we'll add one of our supervisor cars with that ambulance on all of their potentially advanced life support calls, so we can still allow them to be upgraded to a paramedic unit. So that's the consequence of not having an adequate number of additional people on each shift, which is what the floaters do. Is we do all of our leave as scheduled, but as our numbers grow, we've got more shifts that we have to cover. So we have people that get regular vacation, they get personal leave days, then they get sick and safe days. The other thing that occurs to us with some frequency is we have people that are out long-term, either from FMLA or line of duty injuries. So at any given time, we've had up to 6 or 7 people on modified duty, meaning they can't do their jobs. They come and they do work at the academy and our warehouse and things like that. So not having enough people to backfill them means we're now paying for their regular salaries and then their replacements at time and a half rate. So having the additional floaters would significantly reduce that. And we've provided budget with all types of information based on our ability now to actually predict what's going to happen in a subsequent year based on the amount of leave time and things that are there.
so to kind of like sum that up and like to use 3 words, I mean, it's safety is one, just to make biggest one. If somebody just got off a 24-hour shift and now they're being held over and didn't get much sleep the night before, that's a safety issue for the personnel, as well as for the people that they could be treating, which brings me to the next point is performance. How well of a performance job are they going to be able to do? Now, I know that the county, or Chief Robinson and Chief Supko have requirements in that nobody works more than 48 hours, which is a good thing. But that's also, but then you get into the biggest one, which I think it is the quality of life. You know, folks are planning on having off that morning, and what else do they need to do? People get a job in the fire department, they understand that a holdover is possible. And Mike, you probably wouldn't disagree with that, would you?
It is a necessary evil. This is one of the single most contributors to, I guess, hits in morale and potential retention issues. And I mean, I'll just put like the everyday is I had to hold over one of my paramedics last shift on my shift because they had to. Luckily, this wasn't the scenario with them, but on a regular basis, phone calls are immediately going out to grandma, grandpa to say, where are you? Can you come pick up my kid? Because they were, they make contingencies, but that still doesn't mean that it's easy. We need to minimize this and eliminate it as much as possible.
The next positions we want to talk about are the 4 safety officers. And Commissioner Collar, I'm going to maybe use a little bit more familiar term, but this is almost like a construction safety manager. I looked up the definition of that yesterday just to see and it was interesting to see how much that definition mirrored to what we're asking for here with these 4 positions. It ensures that with exposures to carcinogens, we can have somebody that's going to be there, and not that we don't have somebody there every time, but this would be a dedicated safety person that their job is to sit there and look at the safety of what's going on around that incident, the same as if it was a construction manager worrying about what's going on at the construction site. This person would sit there with the meters, and they would say, hey, you stay on air. You don't come off of air until the meter levels get to a certain point. They can look around and see what's going on, that if, hey, a chimney doesn't look very stable right now, that they can make recommendations to clear that area so that people can get out of there. Floors going weak, there's things that can be done there to minimize the chance of somebody getting hurt. All of these things are in place that they can be helpful with this safety officer. Now, that's just the stuff that I'm talking about that's going on the scene of an incident. When they're not on an incident, they're developing training programs or ensuring that the people have all of their mandatory required trainings that the department has to go through every year to make sure that they are in compliance with that. They can also make sure that the equipment that's being used is being up to date on all the preventive maintenance that's being done on them. Have they had their yearly checks done that they need to have done on them? Is all the apparatus had all their DOT inspections done on them? All those things are scheduled. All of those things are part of the job that the safety officer will be able to help accomplish. But a thing that we're seeing more and more in the community, and Chief Robinson and Chief Supko can talk to you more about this, is the amount of times that we're seeing lawsuits being brought up and major money being given out from municipalities and county governments and local governments of the lack of establishing a safety officer on the scenes of these accidents, or incidents, of incidents.
There's a small town currently in Illinois that has declared bankruptcy because they had a line of duty death, and it was cited by the Illinois OSHA that they did not have a safety officer on the scene. The estate of the decedent filed a lawsuit, $31.5 million, and it's been upheld by the Supreme Court in Illinois. So cases like that are happening every day around the country, and it's not just the liability, is we would hope we would never get in that situation. Our staffing right now on fires is feast or famine. We can have the right time on the nights or weekends where we get plenty of volunteers coming out. Most of the daytime, it's taking all of our paramedic ambulances responding with fire engines to have minimal staffing. And the challenge is statistically, line of duty deaths are occurring either at the beginning of an incident or when we let our guard down after the incident. So having a dedicated position there to do the operational safety. The other challenge we have is 3 years ago, we had received a citation from Maryland OSHA where they came to a fire station that had not met safety standards, and we were fortunate we didn't get a fine, but we did get a citation. We had to validate for them some remediation. We have no way now, with our limited number of supervision and all the other tasking we do, to assure that all of our compliance training and OSHA mandates are being met. And this is the type of thing where we're already on MOSHA's radar. Our concern is that they come back, and they will be back, or we get an incident and we're unable to meet the safety compliance. So this is a position that we need 4 of them because they're going to be on shift work. But these folks aren't going to bed. If they're in bed before 11 o'clock every night, that would be, they're not doing their job. They're going to have a lot of tasks to go countywide. We did have a volunteer program previously for safety officers, and the standards weren't up to, they were hit or miss. This would guarantee a position. They would be at the lieutenant level, so they would have supervisory authority, and it's a matter of the consistency. Accident investigation. The other thing that's in the legislature that I know Commissioner Kyler is aware of is this marijuana bill for firefighters. And if that picks up, we are going to have a lot of challenges because, number one, we require our people to have CDLs, so that right away is a violation. But the testing for marijuana is not there. So we're going to be doing more reasonable suspicion testing. And when we do a reasonable suspicion test, we not only have to take someone to Carroll Occupational Health, but it requires we stay there with the supervisor. So there's just a whole lot of things, and we've been before the position committee to show them all of the rationale for this position.
And Chief, can you get us some more information on that? Because it sounds like something the Board of Commissioners could also assist you in weighing in on, having your back with that.
Yes, and at the whole marijuana thing, we met with the Metro chiefs on Tuesday, and we went officially in opposition to that bill, so we're going to send documentation down there. But there's just a lot of challenges with that, and it's just going to increase our need for greater safety supervision if it were passed. But just on a daily basis with the compliance and operational needs, this is really a critical position. And so we've been building for the last 4 years, and we had other positions that we needed first, but now we're to the point where this is the next stage in our evolution, is to assure this on a 24/7 basis.
So we go ahead and jump the stump to the station captains. Right now, at Mount Airy, Westminster, and Sykesville, there are 4 lieutenants, 1 for each shift at those stations. What ESAC is proposing and what the chief has requested is that one of those positions, lieutenant's positions at each one of those stations, be upgraded to the rank of captain. What that does is that it provides a single point of contact for the volunteer chief in that station to contact that captain. He doesn't have to contact all 4 lieutenants on the shift now, that is his responsibility then to make sure that it funnels down to the other 3 to make sure that they get the information that needs to be passed on. It also creates promotional opportunities and career growth in the department. That's one of the things that we, ESAC, have always talked about that needs to happen when we're establishing this department, is that folks need to have some type of career growth or career path that they know that they can promote to either better themselves or better their way of life. It also provides an opportunity, again, but most importantly, operationally, by having the single point of contact for each of those stations to have a captain in place. This will only cost, we're not asking for more positions here. These positions already exist. We're just asking that 3 of those lieutenant positions that are currently on the books be upgraded to the rank of captain. The last thing that we made a recommendations for was an additional logistics support person. There's only 1 logistics person now trying to serve 13 firehouses. It's hard with 224 people working in those stations and trying to get the necessary supplies and equipment to those. Chief feels that he needs an additional person to do that. So that's 13 new positions that we're proposing for the FY27 budget. Continue on, that's how we're looking at the volunteer staffing requests. Chief sent out a request to the 14 departments wanting to know if they had any requests for additional people, and this was the response that he received back for 29 additional people. Now, ESAC is totally being realistic to knowing that from the list of things that we requested on the previous page and trying to ask for a total of 42 people is probably between nil and nil. You know, it's not going to happen. We understand that, but we want the board and we want the county to start thinking about, is a SAFER grant a way to think about going? Granted, that is not free money. They still cost money for the county to come up with, but it's not the total cost of that person for the first 2 years. On the 3rd year is when it becomes more money also. So there's 3 years of a less money that the county has to pay on it, but it also increases the capability of some of these things that they're requesting. Now, one of the things that I've heard say, well, SAFER grant is for hiring firefighters. Okay, I get that. But all of these positions, except for the ones that were requested by Tawnytown for their 2nd EMS unit, are firefighter positions. And we can get, I don't want to say, we can satisfy that SAFER requirement by hiring firefighter EMTs and then changing the classification of some current positions that we have now, since most of those positions are all going to be riding a fire engine. talk about apparatus replacement. It's great, we got 3 new ambulances coming, but we're not going to see them until in the calendar year 27 or early 28. Right now, of the ambulances that are out in service and in the stations, that we will have 2 ambulances in the county that will have close to 300,000 miles on them by the time those 3 ambulances hit here in calendar year 28. We will have 1 ambulance that'll be over 20 years old. So if we use those 3 ambulances just to satisfy those 3 units, we will still have 16 ambulances in the county. We will have 16 ambulances in the county, we'll have over 100,000 miles on them in 2028. 3 of those ambulances will have over 90, and 3 of the county ambulances that were bought in 2023 and 2024 will have over 90,000 miles on them. 2 of those 3 will have over 100. There is a mileage chart in your packet that talks about the mileage in hours. It's in that package here. That talks about the mileage and the hours for each of the units in the county as of the beginning of February. So ESAC wants to make the recommendation that we need to buy some ambulances now. We need to look at buying some demo ambulances if they are available and if we can get them to satisfy some of these requirements for these high mileage and 20-year plus ambulances now. We need to look at the same thing in calendar year 27. If those 3 ambulances that were bought are any later in delivery in calendar year 28, we're going to start to have an issue. But we also need to think about in fiscal year 27 and 28 of continuing with the purchase of X number of ambulances, knowing that the delivery time is going to be 24 plus months out, that you can then get on a replacement schedule to make those things happen without having to buy as many ambulances every year. Now, these numbers also take into account, we don't know what can happen, or, thank goodness the latest ambulance that was totaled, that nobody was hurt, seriously killed or maimed, that they couldn't come back to work, but that ambulance was totaled. You can't project those kind of things out in the future. Our reserve fleet is getting old. Our reserve fleet of ambulances is increasing in their miles, and in fact, that's one of the ambulances that's going to be close to 300,000 miles on it, is one of the reserve units. So what we're making these recommendations here too is that we need to seriously consider buying some ambulances now in order to meet the mission needs that we're going to have in the near term.
Can you just spend a moment explaining what a demo ambulance is and why they are typically a lower cost?
Well, it's not so much at a lower cost, but it's a demo. It's an ambulance that the vendor has built so that they can take it around to people to show it, just like if you had a car, or like car dealerships used to, and some still might do, where they give their salesman a car to go drive around it. All right. Well, their salesmen aren't driving around the ambulances unless they're taking it to a firehouse someplace for them to look at as potentially buying it. But a lot of those ambulances might not have the specifications built into it that are needed for Carroll County. That's what the chief bought when he bought those 3 ambulances that are going to be delivered in calendar year 28. These might meet the operational need in the short term because we've already bought some demo units that will do that, but we already see some, I don't say deficiencies, but shortfalls, that they don't meet everything that we need them to do.
And the trend in the industry currently is with the local, it's just like car dealers, they're franchisees of the manufacturers. Their trend is that they are all having demos produced for their dealerships so they have a product to take around. Our specification is very similar to what everyone else is doing out there in the field, so the demos come very close. In the case of our Gamber unit that was totaled, from the time that we had the accident on September the 6th till the time we were able to place a new unit in service, deal with the insurance, and certainly we appreciate what you all did to expedite that. It was three months that we were able to replace that, and it's only because the local dealer had a unit available. So conceptually, if we were able to buy demos assuming they're available, we still have 10 corporate-owned ambulances, including those that are going to have the 300,000 miles, that over the next cycles between budget and 3 years to build them, we're looking at 6 to 8 years out before our fleet is a total county fleet. And the other thing to be cognizant of is that under the MOU, we're required to manage all the repairs of those units and pay for them. So it's quite possible that we're going to exceed the total cost of a new unit several times while we're waiting to catch up with those 10 additional units that we need. And we also need to have a certain amount of reserve ambulances. We have 1 county-owned reserve right now. 2 are owned by CC Visa. And again, our plan is out of the 16 ambulances, we would have 6 in reserve at any given time. Because these things, for example, we have a brand new ambulance that they found some electronic modules that had a problem. They have to go back to a local dealer. They're under warranty, fortunately, but those units are out for 5 and 6 weeks at a time. So there are days when we may reach a threshold where we have no reserve ambulances. Frederick County had one time loaned us an ambulance, and since our accident, they have retracted that offer to provide us with reserves. So we're in a big challenge and trying to catch up, but the real challenge is going to be the maintenance potential of the 10 that we have remaining in the fleet. So our recommendation would be is that over 2 budget years, we buy 5 ambulances each year, and we'd be given the option that if we can find suitable demo units, that we could get them replaced within 6 months versus 2 to 3 year delivery time.
And that's a struggle that everybody's dealing with right now. You know, so if we go to look at a demonstrator ambulance, you guarantee it there's everybody else in the state that's looking for them as well, too. So trying to achieve that number of 5 could be difficult, but looking at the numbers that you have in front of you, I think it's something that we need to strive or make the recommendation for, that we need to look into to make that happen, if we can.
What did the volunteers do when, well, they owned their own ambulances, right, until now, until they
Yes.
switched over? What did they do when these situations arose back
Well,
then?
we didn't have the situation prior to COVID, and now the other thing that adds complexity to that are the tariffs, because a lot of these things, the components are coming from Mexico and Canada. So
I mean, what did they do about if one was out of commission for several weeks, they didn't have their
they
unit?
used the CC Visa 3 reserve ambulances.
So those reserves, that's what they were,
Right, so
That's
that's
okay.
3 ambulances for a fleet of 16 first-line units. Those are the ones that are in service every day, so,
and so those CCV Visa units are owned by CC Visa?
yep. So, and 2 of those, one of those is probably on its last leg, and so we don't have enough reserves. Now, what we have done is we've had a company, Sykesville, had blown an engine up because of the MOU. We replaced the engine for the cost of $38,000, and we have since placed 2 brand-new county-owned units at Sykesville, so they're keeping the 3rd, and it's been made available to us as an additional reserve. So we're using a Band-Aid approach right now to a long-term overall fleet problem.
And remind me, one of the other issues, I think, is that the number of companies that are producing these vehicles has also declined,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, so right now we have, I believe it's 4 volunteer companies that have a second ambulance, like Tawnytown
But
and
Joe's talking about manufacturers,
oh,
right?
yes.
Right, the
Yes.
companies, yeah.
Manufacturers.
Yeah, manufacturers were probably down to probably 6 major manufacturers.
For the entire country.
Yes, and several of those ambulances are owned by the same venture capital organization. We're actually purchasing from that. Congress has addressed that under antitrust, and they just held hearings back in November. So I've been to both of the factories, and as recently as October, when we went down to look at our, take delivery on our last unit, they are building for everybody. FDNY, for example, makes 200 new ambulance purchases a year. They have a whole separate factory on the grounds of the factory just to serve FDNY. So if you take your larger cities, they're all going with the same two manufacturers that we use. So even though we can go down and we can order today, they won't even begin to produce that ambulance for 2 years. You know, the good news is the primary chassis manufacturers, Dodge, Ford, Chevy, International, and Freightliner, have now gotten to the point where they've caught up with a lot of things. So the chassis end of it is now getting there, and it used to be that was holding things up. One of the factories we use is in Ohio, so they're subject to climate changes. The other one is in Florida, and both of those factories have a workforce that's really is pride in American manufacturing. They literally build these things from scratch, and there's 700 or 800 employees every day on site. They take pride in what they do, and they're working them as much overtime as they can to keep their production cycles in there. But it's like anything else, finding skilled laborers, welders, electricians. They even make their own seats. So they've got upholstery shops, they've got cabinet shops, and the industry has changed a little bit. The majority of the material they're using is aluminum. So a lot of the aluminum is imported from Canada and other countries, and so the tariffs and the supply chain has really been disrupted as a result of political consequences. So that's increasing the time on delivery.
So there's a lot of factors involved. We just need to get some more ambulances sooner. On some apparatus replacement concerns, the picture there is of their 2007 E1 that was bought back in 2007 by CC Visa. Per the Insurance Services Office, we should have 3 reserve engines, and we only have 1. Increasing the number of reserves will not only help keep us a fire engine in some firehouses when one goes down, but with the expense that these things are getting at, it might also help with some departments may be making a decision here soon, but they can't afford to buy 2 pumpers anymore. That they might have to go back to, just purchasing 1. So if they have 1 go down, there's not another one there to back it up. So if we had some more reserves in place, it could help with that situation. And all this, again, is going back to it's going to help the readiness of the department. So, recommendation that ESAC is making this is here again, let's look to see if there's a demo unit out there that can satisfy our needs. The demo fire truck's a little bit harder to come by than what demo ambulances are, especially ones that we look at that's going to meet our needs, because there's a whole lot more things that you're going to have to require on it than what you're going to require other than just cabinetry on an ambulance. Is our current reserve engine worth a rehab? If it is worth a rehab, is it worth sticking the money into it to look at it to see if it can be refurbished enough to get another 5-10 years out of it as a reserve? And as with ambulances, we need to get on a purchase schedule for reserve engines, keeping in mind the lead time is 24 to 36 months, which more likely is 30 to 36 months to get a fire truck from the time that you order it till you go to get it. So those are some things that we also feel that need to be addressed.
And that cost is over $1 million for reserve engines. That would be a spare fire engine for us. So the other thing to look at is whatever assistance can be done to support the volunteers, those companies that are able to maintain beyond 1 fire engine. And because we would give assistance in procuring those, the deal would be is they would make them available to all of the fire companies within the county. But we're really at a crossroads here because what the ISO does, ISO is a third party that rates insurance in every community in America, and they rate fire departments. And they have certain criteria that includes water supply, personnel, training, communications. There's a whole lot of criteria that goes into what's called the public protection classification. So without enough reserve engines, what potentially happens is if you're a property owner in Carroll County and they come in and they do these audits every 3 to 5 years of the fire departments, they find out we don't have reserve engines, someone's homeowner insurance could go up $200, $400, $600. And they regulate everything that fire departments do. And insurance is a big part of that. It's even more of an economic development issue because large corporations coming into Carroll, manufacturing, the limited manufacturing we have, when we don't meet the threshold requirements of the ISO, their commercial insurance, which is on another basis system, can go up significantly, and it can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars to an established business within the county.
So when you talk about the reserve, do they also look at how many fire departments you have and how much availability of backup you have?
Yes.
Because, some might have way less backup, so that.
Where's water is at? Is it hydrant in
Yes,
there?
there's
Does
the
that
whole
go into how much
source?
reserve you need? So if you have a low incident area and they could back up, if you have several together, does that count that you have more facilities? Or if you had less facilities and put them into reserve, would that be better?
Yes, it's,
Which one, yes? Which one?
well,
Because you two different.
we have to
things.
have
It's an or.
whoever owns them isn't the key factor, it's the availability.
No, but if you have an area that's got here, 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 and they're low volume, and then you got one here that's high volume, and if you, this one, the high volume needed the engine, and they were loaned by one of the low volume that could be covered by the others, I'm just trying to say, right now, we have them at all these fire stations, they're not all equal, and the
Right.
truck is equal, but the demand isn't equal. Is there any way that could count, that these were the backup reserve? We're just trying to find a balance
No,
between.
because you have to have an engine that's specifically identified and available for reserve. They won't take what they call first line apparatus. So if I'll use Winfield as an example. If Winfield has 2 fire engines right now, Winfield, the insurance people are assuming that those 2 fire engines are there primarily to serve Winfield's district that they cover. They don't look at one of them saying, oh, that counts as a reserve. They look for a specific fire engine that sits available, doesn't have a crew assigned to it, and is available when something breaks to go to that fire station to take its place.
So every fire station in the county has multiple engines in it because the county only has one reserve. So at Winfield, if our engine goes out of service for whatever reason, blows a tire, something simple that could happen, there has to be a backup. Well, if that happens at Winfield and it happens at New Windsor and there's only one spare engine, then somebody doesn't have one, right? I mean, that's just common sense. So all these departments over the years have always had at least 2, so they have a backup. The problem is, now we're talking about $1.5 million to have 2 of those sitting there. So how can you continue to afford to do that
Well, that's
forever?
my point. My point is, there's only so much money to go around. You need
Right,
positions.
but to your point, I believe, and Chief, you can correct me or not, ISO says a fire department has to be within 5 miles of your house. So like if I borrow, say Westminster is the high volume one, and New Windsor is a lower volume one. Well, Westminster goes out of service, we borrow New Windsor's engine. Now the New Windsor area doesn't have an engine, so now they get, their ISO rating is the highest that would be out there because they're not recognized as
But
having
if
a
it's
fire
temporary, I'm
department.
just trying to figure out if it's temporary. If they have 2 and they still have their 1 and you've temporarily for the 5 or 6 loaned it out, does that count? I'm just trying to, we've got a lot of capital needs and we got a lot of staffing needs. And it's like, how do we use economies of scale the best part we can on the apparatus? It doesn't mean none of it, but how do you best use that so that you can put that money into the people? Because you at some point you got to be picking and choosing, and there's ways to use and consolidate on lower volume. There's lower volume stations.
And also with some, I think
Most
we're cost effective and efficient.
It's
So the
already
answer is,
happening.
as you're saying, is to support the volunteers in keeping multiple fire engines.
Is it better to put more money in toward reserves or more money into individual fire stations to buy the
Right.
multiple apparatus?
Well, there's lots of-
would
I
be
mean-
one option.
Right. It's
As
just-
far as letting people borrow, like I know Mount Airy, just out of the blue, both of their engines are out of service at the same time. So they have called Winfield and borrowed one of Winfield's engines, and Winfield goes down to just one for a period of time so that Mount Airy has one. Otherwise, what is that community doing?
Well, if you're a high volume area like that, could you borrow one from somewhere that there's three, I'd have to look at them all.
If it was available, certainly.
I'm just trying to figure out how to best use them and spread them out.
Right.
And we had,
And-
and using Mount Airy as an example, we have had an engine from Lineborough at Mount Airy.
That's my point, I mean, something
Yeah,
like that.
for a short period of
Temporary.
time.
The ISO rating looks at a geographical area and what resources we're able to deliver to that area within a certain amount of time. So there's only so much removing around that we can do it, like, and it's certainly any permanent level, to actually maintain that ISO rating without increasing that response area so drastically that we then inadvertently drop our ISO rating back down to an ineffective rate where then we also have the insurance impacts all again. So it's this balance of available
Understanding
resource
that,
and
because,
geographics.
again,
Right.
if you got so much you can put into fire, and you're trying to find a balance, we want to make sure we're putting as much as we can into the staffing.
Right.
The right-
Because the right balance, because if you put it onto this for things that are sitting there, you then won't have,
So Rick is gonna talk about it on a later slide, and I've brought it up before about doing a third-party study. One of the things the study would do would look at exactly what you're talking about.
Let's get to
and
that.
They would
we'll get to it.
bring that, so rather than,
So,
And I think Rick's bringing it up too. One way that you guys could help with that is the low-interest loan program.
we'll get
So
to that too.
Yeah, the volunteers, I think, are willing to try to purchase these things, but they can't purchase them at an 8% rate to be paying back those type of loans.
Top priority for some of us. But we're working on it.
So, a quick history lesson, one of the things that you had in order to be a member back in the day of the Carroll County Volunteer Firemen's Association was that you had to have 2 engines in your firehouse. Just for this scenario that we were talking about, that if one goes down, you still have another one that can be used.
Even for the small guys like Harney,
Yep,
Yep.
that's a lot.
yep,
But they also didn't used to cost $1.5 million.
right.
Well, that's true.
Yeah,
Okay,
nothing costs that, as much as it does.
some of the volunteer concerns that we've talked about at ESAC. The 3% increase that we get to the county budget every year is just not cutting it. And I know you've already heard that from some other folks, but it's just not. The wear and tear on the buildings and the apparatus is increasing. You know, we've got more people living at firehouses than what we had before. Our call volumes are increasing, wear and tear on the buildings increasing. You know, the doors are going up and down a lot more often. People are sleeping in the beds that need to be replaced. Chairs are being sat in more. Kitchen appliances are being used more. So all these things are feeding into it. Insurance deductibles. When the volunteers had their own policies, the deductibles were much lower. They were $1,000 for a deductible. Policy deductibles are now higher due to the number of accidents that we've been having with county employees driving them. And the deductible's going up to $10,000 per incident.
Who pays the deductible?
Getting that.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
So right now, if a county employee is driving an apparatus that has an accident, the $10,000 deductible is paid for by the county government. If a volunteer is driving and has an accident, now the volunteer corporation's on the hook to pay for it. Now, the problem that we had in ESAC in talking about this, it's a county policy. We follow the same driving rules and regulations and policies that the career people do. And for a volunteer corporation to come up with $10,000 to pay for a deductible that we didn't do anything to the policy to increase, that's 4 pancake dinners at my firehouse, so we gotta come up with that $10,000. Or that's $10,000 less that's going to go towards purchasing a $1.3 million fire engine. So we think that needs to have some thought and conversation about how we handle that. We've talked about apparatus purchasing. The prices continue to go up with each purchase. Delivery times are till 24 to 36 months, more like 30 to 36 months. And what we've already mentioned about some departments may have to go back to 1 engine because they can't afford to buy 2, which would increase the need to have a more reserve engine. Apparatus maintenance costs and repair times keep going, also increasing. You can't plan for a blown motor or a radiator to go up out of one of these units or multiple things. We had one of our engines in Mount Airy go out of service. It needed a new radiator. It was a $10,000 repair. to get that thing back up and running. We can't budget for that 18 months out when we're going through the process we're doing right now. So we need to have a little bit, there needs to be some more conversation about that. We've talked about the financing, availability of low-interest loans, higher interest rates with conventional loans. This is all more money that's coming from the volunteer corporations to make this happen, which, is a major concern. It's great that the commissioners let our delegation know that there needs to be some changes to the MSFA, the low-interest loans that the state association offers, but that's not going to help fix our local problem here. They're looking at for every volunteer fire department across the state of Maryland, and the money is just not there to do that. So some of the recommendations to work with Visa to make the budgeting more realistic. County government to pay for all accident deductibles. Can we come up with an alternative for the low-interest loans? I know we have a plan here. It mirrors what the VCAP plan is, but there's not enough money in that program either to make this work, to continue to help out the corporations buy some of this apparatus. And we also need to look at increasing the yearly interest line on the budgets and increasing that above $50,000.
Do you happen to know offhand what?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry.
When
I'm sorry,
when
Mr.
Visa
Ryan.
submits their budget, there's a line in there for interest payments.
Oh, for the county, for.
Yeah,
that We help out with your.
That's
line.
correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Do you happen to know offhand what the annual cumulative amount for accident deductibles is for all the companies? How much per year we spend on deductibles for accidents?
We'll get that for you
Okay.
from risk management.
All right, thank you.
So Rick, what you just said about the line item in the budget, so in the CC Visa budget, your interest gets reimbursed for the
Yes.
vehicles? So why does it matter what the interest rate is?
I'm sorry?
If you get reimbursed for the interest, why do you care what the interest rate is?
Because a lot of the departments have more interest than over $50,000.
Oh, the 50,000 is what's limited.
Yes.
So you could either lower the interest rate or up the cap.
More so up the cap,
To
yeah.
relieve the issue that you're having.
Well,
just
it
need
would
more
relieve
help on
a
it.
issue of what we're having, yeah. Let me
Well,
use Hampstead as an example. They're paying a mortgage payment right now on their new firehouse and new building. If they also go and buy a new fire engine, which they have requested to go out and buy a new fire engine as well too, they're going to exceed that $50,000 cap that's in their budget line.
So
So
they're
their
in,
capital on their building counts toward that.
That's correct.
Yeah,
And we
so
pay the
in-
interest on that too?
yeah, so in their budget submission, and this year I sat down with each of the companies in the budget committee, they had put in for $300,000 for interest, which we quickly told them we can't sustain that through the county budget. So they're gonna get considerably less from that.
And I guess maybe we should figure out, I don't know about the building piece. You got the building piece, you have the apparatus piece. Which one, and we pay the interest on both right now. Would
You
be better-
give the departments interest money. I guess they choose where it goes, like if they're paying $100,000 a year in interest, they pick up whether it goes towards the building interest or the apparatus
Yeah, we
interest,
give-
whatever it is.
We give Visa the money. and-
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
that's,
it might be good to say this is what we paid for this, but not for this. And then it's up to us if we want to give a lower rate or up the amount for, would that be, how do we
I
make it
think all
be
those things are
consistent?
conversations that you need to have with Visa to have that conversation to make it. I think it could be a solution, but that number has been at $50,000 for years. And with the price of things going up, it needs to be looked at to be
Every
increased.
part of the problem is every fire department is different. And we need to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and they all have different issues. How
I
do,
don't disagree. But from what we have talked about at Visa, at ESAC, that this was one of the conversations that was happening, and I said Visa because we've had the same conversations there too at those monthly meetings, so, it just needs to be increased just because of the amount of money that's being spent for the rates that they're paying for the things that they have to do to keep in business. But I would encourage that conversation to happen. Almost done. Recruitment and retention. Pay scales for the career side. Right now, there are no pay scales for their career people that work in the county. You know, they get the increases, but they seem to get increases for as all the other county employees. If we had some kind of pay scales that were related to merit, that it would give, again, the employees a notice to see that they are working in a county that has the same benefits and the same opportunities as other jurisdictions around them. Other jurisdictions around us all have fire department pay scales that they work towards. If a firefighter paramedic makes this year, at the end of year 2, they make this, at the end of year 5, they make this, and it goes through like that. Mike, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think we recognize that this is a massive, change and would be an additional kind of practice that the county would be taking on doing something like this. Right now, you can go on to any of the departments around us, any of the counties, including Washington County, and look and see what the projection is, because that's what we look at the pay scale. This isn't a promise. I think that whether there's, a CBA involved in some kind of number that's attached to it, or whether it's just practice, organizationally within a government, is that each one of these things is a projection of what you should be making, at a certain point. It's not necessarily a promise. What we're asking is that we have some kind of visual of that projection, I think that should be part of the conversation and part of the delivery with that too, educationally, even for the employee to say, this is based on obviously budget decisions. This is based on all of these other factors that, yes, this is a projection of where, given our practices, or an intent of where you'll go, but please understand at the same time that this could vary because of what it is. I mean, if you look at any of these other jurisdictions, they may set a pay scale for 2 years. At the end of that 2 years, they're going to be changing it anyways, given whatever changes come along the line. So, it is very significant. We recognize that, but I can tell you that this is one of the biggest day-to-day conversations. If you ask anyone what kind of improvements they would like to see on just like that kind of level, as far as the retention side, all the other stuff matters, but this is like one of those very tangible planning things that comes up on a very regular basis. So,
on the volunteer side of the house, improvements of LoSAP. I know CTVs is working with county government right now to make some proposed changes to the LoSAP program. ESAC believes that there's other things that's great for somebody who's turning 60 or whatever we set the age at for somebody when they start drawing their LoSAP benefits. But what can we do for the 20-somethings and the 30-somethings that are trying to donate their time to volunteer and take the training and things? Can we order them some type of program where we did have a trial program like that 2 boards ago, where we come up with helping pay for student loans and student tuitions? I know in my own department that I had like 7 people that took advantage of that, and those 7 people had to maintain their LoSAP to make sure that they were still maintaining active, but they also were still in the top 10 of responders that were making a real effort to come and make sure that they were getting their LoSAP points done so they could get this tuition reimbursement. Some of the kids were college kids that when they were home on break, or if they had a free weekend that they could sneak home, they were in a firehouse sitting there just so that they could get their time in to make their LoSAP requirements in order to get that tuition and reimbursement. So I think that's something that is very beneficial that needs to be discussed. I've also put in your packet, there is an example of what some other counties have done with property tax breaks for volunteers and employees. I think the example that I put in your packet is from Anne Arundel County, that for 10 years, they will give a tax break for their volunteers that make LoSAP, as well as for their county employees that work in public safety. Could that be something, and an incentive that would help get new people to continue to live in Carroll County that work for us and volunteer here for us? But that information's in there too, and we can provide some more information about that if you see fit. And one of the requirements of it is that they have to meet LoSAP in order to get that requirement, and for the county employee to continue to live in Carroll County in order to get it. Chief alluded this to us about, is it time for us to look at a third-party vendor to look at the entire department's operations? Again, that costs money too. And I've been around long enough, as some other people in this room have known, that we've had we've had these studies done in the past, and they get them, and they become shelfware, because people don't like what they find out in them. And sometimes it's hard to implement some of the things that are in them, but I personally still believe that it's worthwhile doing, because eventually, it seems like history shows us that you might not do it now, but 4 or 5 years from now, you might be able to get to it to do it.
We're at a crossroads right now. We've, in the last 4 years, built upon developing an EMS capability from something that was very much fractured, and now we're quickly becoming the standard for the rest of the state with some of our innovations. And every day we have 16 paramedic units, 3 paramedic supervisors. We're handling the whole EMS issue and doing great. So now we're at a crossroads where we have to evaluate what is the next logical step. And before you commit too many resources to that, we need to measure ourselves against what we've already done from an outside perspective, and looking at the different standards, which include not just the insurance standards, but the National Fire Protection Association standards. And then there is also a commission out there that accredits fire departments based on about 1,200 different benchmarks. So using all 3 criteria, as well as the county's geography, the county's governmental structure, the tax base, and all those concerns, which would look at everything from apparatus to personnel to volunteer and career recruitment and retention, a third-party organization coming in and doing a study that would include interviewing stakeholders, citizens, everything that would be comprehensive, would probably yield a good template and do some benchmarking of where we are. We may or may not like the results, but I think if you would decide on that, you all would create some of the criteria in an RFP that would go out to determine who the vendor would be. And these things typically take anywhere from about 4 to 6 months, and then they provide a comprehensive set of recommendations. So I believe it would be money best spent, because we've got a lot of self-proclaimed expertise here, if you will, but I think getting the third-party validation of people that have done that, bringing in fire protection engineers, bringing in, and most of these people that do them, for example, International City Management Association is one vendor. There's a number of fire-related vendors that are out there. The International Fire Chiefs does those types of studies. So it's a big market out there, and I think having the right RFP would determine the criteria, and I think the results would give us some kind of a direction of, are we doing the right thing? Where is the future? What do we need to do? And
Well, one thing, you said the devil's in the details. It is in the details of what goes out of your request and the parameters you're setting. And it's sort of like building a house. People live in lots of different kind of houses, and they still are healthy and okay, and they survive. But depending on what you say, go build me a house, are they gonna build you a mansion, or are they gonna build you this house, or are they gonna build you this? So we've gotta say, where do we wanna be?
Yes.
And I also want to look back to the volunteers and say, where do you see yourselves in 10 years? What can we do to support what we have? Because I've said it all along, volunteers are not just about putting out fires. They're like the hubs of our communities. I don't want to lose that. That's what makes Carroll County.
Correct.
It's a lot of work, it's a lot of volunteers, and we need to be where we are. But I personally would like to see what we do to maintain as much of that as possible.
right, and they would look at the demographics, they would be interviewing people. It would be very comprehensive to do exactly what you're
So how do we
stating.
write something? We don't want to live in the mansion. We don't need it. We want to make sure people are safe, healthy, we're serving our community, and that's many different ways. But I'd like to see if you guys could come up with just what you would recommend in the RFP, and talk with the volunteers, like what they
Yes.
think they're going to be 5 years, 10 years, whatever. How would that be structured? And it's hard because everybody's different, because the idea itself is not a bad one. But again, what we tell them, because they come back with this thing that's so big that we can't even touch
Right.
it, it's a waste of money. So we got to give them some type of parameters. There is a, reality.
And I think between you all as the commissioners, and I mean, ESAC would be a good forum to develop some criteria of areas that we want to look
And every department might tell you something different. They might say in a high-density area, we can't keep up, we might need X, but there might be some areas that we end up being able to keep a hybrid.
Yes.
But I really would like to see what we ask them to do within a reason, so it's not just put on a shelf. Because when you look for something, you might get something you'll never touch. It's gotta be achievable, and achievable within the other things where, this buildup of this has been huge impact on the budget, and it's done very well, but it doesn't mean it's not a big impact, and it impacts other things that we're doing. So we gotta figure out, how do we balance
Well,
all
and they
that?
need to look at the parameters, and I mean, for example, the growth of the tax base is only gonna be a certain amount. There's certainly political dynamics that fall into it, and these organizations are pretty high performance in terms of doing these. They do them throughout the country in all different sized communities. So I think they would be very much respectful of what you're saying.
And one thing is a little bit related to this, but I know, and I'm learning this in the last few months, certain types of buildings, if they're big, need the ladder trucks. They need other apparatus. I want to make sure that we consider that. I never really thought about that before, like when we allow larger, tall buildings. Oh, we now need this apparatus. What does that mean for us, just
Yes.
because we let a building be bigger? And, making sure that our adequate public facilities, that we do have adequacy, because I look at the way we look at adequacy now, and it's about average response time. An average is an average. If you're the guy that's 20 minutes, it's not good. If you're the guy that's 2 minutes that averaged out to 10, you know what I'm saying? I want to make sure that we are looking at things, our response time's not average, but what was the longest, and what, you know what I'm saying? How many were
Yes.
over the, what?
Yeah, they measure all of those things. in
But
those
I'm saying
studies,
that's,
yeah.
to me, is more of a point, and then depending on where you are in the county, if you're in a more rural area, I don't know if it changes, I don't know if that response times is supposed to get, I don't know if everybody lives within 5 miles of a fire
It does
department.
change, yeah, it does change.
But all those kinds of things need to be thoughtfully considered, and then within a reasonable, something that it's attainable. Even if it's attainable over time, it's gotta be attainable. And it's gotta be agreed to by the people that, listen, our fire companies are the basis of our communities. And maybe they think that might go away in 20, 30, 40 years, I don't know. I hope it doesn't, but maybe they don't agree, and I'd like to hear that from the fire departments.
So I'd like to wrap this, or at least my part of the conversation, up a little bit, where, okay, ESAC came in here with a lot of recommendations. We made some changes that are obviously going to have some impacts to the budget. But I look at this, what I presented today, I look at it as a good news story. I mean, from what we accomplished in the past 5 years, since I've been sitting in this seat as the ESAC chair, and I'm not saying that I did it, I'm saying this was a group effort. I'm saying what it is, that this has been, to say that we would have 13 fire stations with our staffing for our EMS units, a driver for our fire engine, and in some stations, a lieutenant for those, as well as chase cars that we have going around, a medical director that's working well with the department. The volunteer corporations are still providing people space, activities, facilities, for all these things to happen. I think it's a good news story. Do we have work to do? We absolutely have a lot of work to do yet, because this is not going to get something where it stays stagnant and you're going to get to a point and nothing's going to change. We will continually have to evolve as we go down this thing. We're evolving right now. When the MOU was written and they says, okay, the county, we're going to buy ambulances. At that time, we had no idea in this world it was going to take 3 years to get an ambulance. Okay, now it's changed. We know that now. But these conversations need to continue. I think it's been healthy that we have these conversations. I would like to have these conversations more often. And I appreciate your time that you all given us to listen to this presentation today.
Well, thank you very much as well. My colleagues, any further comments or thoughts?
I think the last, a third-party vendor looking at it, I think that's a must. And Carroll County's written proposals for that kind of thing, and there's a lot of professionals out there that would do it well. I'm curious about the rest. Could you guys come up with priorities that whatever, the safety officers are worth more than the floaters, or this is worth more than that. It would be good to see how you guys would rank your needs.
Yes, and our safety officer is the number one priority, then
Okay.
it is the floaters, and really and the storekeeper is kind of a separate entity in itself, but we need something like that. Coincidentally, our current quartermaster who runs that whole operation had an on-duty fall the other day on the ice. We're waiting on the results of his MRI, so potentially he could be out for weeks on end, and we have no backup for him. So we'll have to create something on an interim basis. But having we've got the initial structure, and now we need to look at where the gaps are and build a little bit of redundancy into things.
My personal feeling is, and the chief and I have had this conversation, that I understand that we need the safety officers, but I think we need those other 8 people just as bad, so that we can sit there and take some of the load off of some of the folks. I know Chief Supko is working with HR on numbers and costs and things like that, but I think the things that my personal opinion, and I think it's the opinion of some other folks on ESAC, that what we had on that chart were what we do need. And I totally get what you're coming from
Yeah.
for prioritizing, and I think.
Yeah, I
we
think
did.
every department's asked for priorities. And my humble opinion, you need to be able to do them.
Right.
You know, just say all or nothing. And then the other comment I think I'd like to make, the tax breaks, the tax incentives. Everybody wants them. Seniors want them, veterans want them. And my question is, then who pays? Every other citizen pays more?
No, I'm not saying they pay more.
Well, somebody's got to make up the difference. You know,
I guess we have to look at it too, is a volunteer getting a tax break is going to save the county money for having to buy another employee?
it's gonna,
Save money for having to pay for another position.
I still didn't hear you.
If you give the volunteer a tax break,
Yep.
does that save the county government money in having to pay for an additional position to fill that volunteer
Yeah.
spot?
Yeah, probably not. And then I'm curious, I know a lot of local residents that are Montgomery County, Howard County, Anne Arundel, and so they don't get the tax breaks because they don't live there, you know, and I don't know
Well,
what.
we'll have the same thing here in Carroll County,
Yeah,
where people who live in Pennsylvania to volunteer
Yeah,
across the
so
border, or in
what
Frederick County or
percentage is
Howard
that?
County that come
Yeah.
across the border to volunteer. You're right, it's, that part stinks, but looking at the total system of it, what can we do to
Yeah.
help make things
No, I
better?
understand, but I know, I've been asking the last month, veterans and seniors, a bunch, and like I say, the problem is, if we need X amount of revenue, then somebody needs to make up that difference. And is it fair to every taxpayer to pay more? And some are more than willing. I know Commissioner Vigliotti talks about some of the people in his district that just don't want to pay a penny more of taxes. So, you know, that's a tough argument. But I understand it, and I don't blame you for asking.
Well, I think what you're describing is opportunity cost, essentially as an economic term. So certainly that's something we should be looking at, where you spend money someplace and you might save more someplace else, or at least take that effort and apply it somewhere else, and there may be some cost savings. I just wanted to make one mention before we close out here. I wanted to thank you, Rick, for your service as president of ESAC. You cannot run for another term of president. You're going to be done after how many years?
This will be my 6th year, come
It'll be
June.
6 years. So I want to personally thank you, and on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners, thank you for a busy 6 years. You have been integral in guiding what we all can agree has been a successful transition, not without its challenges, and we're not done yet, as you've repeatedly mentioned, but I'm just particularly grateful for you and all you've done for Carroll County.
Thank you.
Does that mean you stay on as past president? Or maybe we can change
The
that.
bylaws are clear, once, 2 terms and you're done.
But you would think that the institutional knowledge would be helpful to someone coming in just to have you there. maybe we could change that. I just think it's always nice to know. On some of these things, obviously, there's the one about the $10,000 deductible. I understand that a lot. It'd be nice for us to know, how often does that occur? I mean, I know it's not the same, but what's the fiscal impact? I'd like to understand if, are we self-insured for that, the county?
No.
If we had a different deductible, what's the differential? Because we're saving over what it used to be. But a lot of these things, we need to somehow figure out what's the value of it. And then we're gonna have a certain budget, and we're gonna say, okay, these are the 5 things that we think we should be doing. And I totally get about the fire department now having to hit the extra $9,000 on a deductible. But can you get some of the quantification of some of these items? Because that's what it's gonna come down to, not just saying we need 3 of this, or it's gonna be, here's how much we can divvy this out. And is this sort of like, not CCV, I guess CCVs is the volunteers, but everybody's sort of been involved with this, this is some of their priorities as well?
Yes, when we discussed this in November at the ESAC meeting, there were representatives from everybody. Well, I'm a representative of it, right? So, I mean, the Visa president was there when we discussed this. And we agreed at that point in November that this was the message we went back with. When the meeting got delayed 2 months, I went back to the same group again and said, is there any changes in the message that we need to deliver? And the response was, this was the message that we needed to deliver.
Because one of the things on the volunteer funding that has been discussed with me is just not reopening the MOU, but clarifying some of the things in the MOU that and I don't know if those specific discussions have occurred, about maybe this should be included, or this should be included, or not included, so it's a little more specific as things have come up. Did any of that detail come up?
It has been talked about in ESAC that there are some changes that needed to be mainly with building construction, but I would refer those conversations to the officers of Visa.
Okay.
And in the volunteer budget process this year, I was directly involved with the CC Visa person. Since we started, we have tried to combine those items that are common among all 14 companies. So for example, we're going to take this year fire equipment. So if I buy a nozzle to put the end of a hose, Mount Airy buys a $1,200 one, Lineborough buys a $1,500 one, and Westminster buys an $800 one. We're going to consolidate that, use the county's procurement office as part of that process, and we stand to save hundreds of thousands of dollars internally by doing that, and then maybe they can prioritize some of their other areas. But we've done that since the beginning. We pay for the utilities, we pay for maintenance. There's all kinds of areas that we've consolidated for cost savings, because when an individual organization is going out and buying it, they're buying the regular market value. We have the ability to use wholesale and national procurement agreements. Like this morning, our medical supplies were on the Charles County contract. An individual volunteer company can't go out and realize those savings. So whatever we can do to allow greater cost effectiveness, we work with Visa to do that. If there's more of that.
And since I've been through the process this year,
Let me
I didn't know that we were.
1 second, I'm sorry, it's 2:30, I've got it.
Oh, yes, I'm
So
good.
I need to get going.
Thank you,
Great
Commissioner.
job, thank you for your service. and
I wasn't aware that we met
I
with
look forward to
CCVs.
6 more years.
So that will be in my part. I didn't realize that they came in
Part of
front of
the
us as well.
agency,
So
yes.
thank you. You guys did a great job.
All right, so just sum things up. I want to thank everybody for your phenomenal work, and thank you for the good communication between us. We really are a team. We're serving the same citizens. And for all the things that we face in front of us, we'll handle them together as a team. And we cannot do that without you, so thank you very much for your input and for your service. And without anything else, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?